my pastor Noah, he always says this thing too, um, that it's easier for God to give you guidance, I guess, like, or to steer a car that's driving rather than parked. You know what I mean? So to
Mm.
start something, just to be in something and like really invite God, like, God, I'm moving, just like take care of the wheel, like I'm gonna put my foot on the gas, do a little thing here and there, but ultimately move and guide me into the direction that you want me to go. Like there's a specific verse, I think, like, instruct me and teach me in the ways that I should go, counsel me with your righteous eye on me. And I've been saying that since I was probably like in the 7th grade, like just like like really just instruct me and teach me in the ways that you should go, counsel me with your righteous eye on me. I think once you start to move, God will really do that for you. And
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Welcome to the God Be Known podcast. If you're new to this podcast, my name is Samuel Teka, and thank you for taking your time to be on YouTube or on any of our audio platforms. Before we get into today's episode, I just have 3 announcements that I want to share with you guys, and so please bear with me. The first one is, as you guys know, for those that are faithful and consistent followers of the podcast, I post every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Mountain Time. That is now going to change to Wednesday at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. And so I just wanted to make sure that you guys are informed about that. And so it's going to be Wednesday at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. The second thing is, and I would really love your guys' comment and also feedback on this new idea that I have, which is to specifically post YouTube clips of the God Be Known podcast for about 2 to 5 minutes. And if you want the full version of the podcast, you could go to all of our audio platforms, so Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Now, if you're listening to this, I would really love your feedback. If you don't watch on YouTube, I encourage you, go to the YouTube channel, the God Be Known podcast YouTube channel, and then go to episode 10 video, and then go down in the comment box and please let me know what you guys think. If you are down just for me to post the 2 to 5 minute clips of the God Be Known podcast and then get the full length videos on the audio versions, then please let me know. But if you want the full length of the God Be Known podcast in video format on YouTube, then I'll do that for you guys as well. And then you could obviously listen to the full version via audio as well. And so let me know by commenting on episode 10's video on YouTube. And that way I can know what I could do moving forward. Here's the third thing, and this is actually quite exciting. I am coming out with a course. This has been a course that I've been working on for a very long time with modifications, trying to perfect it as much as I possibly can so that it could be a good experience for those that purchase the course. But the course is called A Meaningful Life. And the whole purpose of the course is for Christians to equip them on how to identify and find their God-given purpose, figure out what they love to do, and also make a difference where they are. I highly encourage you. This is a course that is so full of good value and content. And as I would like to say it, you're not investing into a course, you're investing into your life. And so if you are at a place in your life where you don't know what your purpose is, especially as a Christian, you don't know what you love to do, and you feel like you're not making any impact or influencing or making a difference in the world that you feel like you should be, then I highly encourage that you take this course. This course is for you. And guess what? The course itself is for $70, just $70. And it's 2.5 hours and more full of content. And the course is completely yours after you purchase it. You could access it at any given time. And so if you want to find out more information on that, I encourage you to go to samuelteka.ca and you could find all the info there. All right. So without further ado, let's get into today's episode. I have a guest who I consider to be a friend. He's such an amazing guy. One word that comes to mind is just well rounded. He's just a well rounded person, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, physically. And he also has a really, really great beard. And so I want you to lean into this conversation, take notes, listen in, because it is just such an awesome conversation. And so, without further ado, let's welcome David Kebede to the podcast. Welcome to the God Be Known podcast, man.
I appreciate that. Thank you for that introduction.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you do know you have a beard that a lot of people envy, right?
Yeah, the thing is, man, it's just it's heavy as the head that wears the crown. You know what I mean? Because this thing has been attached to my face since I was 17 years old, and
I was
the
actually just going
problem,
to ask you, how long has it
yeah,
taken you to grow that?
this came when I was in high school, so it was like the coolest thing
Wow.
in the world because I was a high school kid with a beard, and it was like already connecting and things like that. But at the same time, it's like everyone thinks that I can somehow give them this secret to the beard formula, but
Yeah,
it's genetics, man. It's genetics. You
that's
can talk
dope.
about the oils all day and whatever, derma rolling.
Yeah,
You
just
just gotta
create a
have
whole
it.
podcast for
Yeah.
beard oil and techniques and strategies.
And the thing is, I just more than anything, I wish I could shave this off. If I'm being completely
Really?
honest. Yeah, I really wish I could, but I
Oh,
literally have
why?
structure underneath it. You just get tired
Is
of
it
it,
a
man.
lot to maintain?
Yeah, it's a lot to maintain. It's a lot to think about. Just honestly, I wish I could switch it up, but like now it's like it's my thing since I was 17, and
Yeah.
to like be a baby face would just be impossible at this point. So maybe
Yeah.
one day I'll just move to like some remote country and just shave everything off so I can start fresh.
I love it.
That's for sure.
We're waiting for it. We're all waiting for it.
Yeah,
So you and I had a conversation. What was it, like 2 weeks ago now?
yeah,
I'm
probably.
losing track of time. I think it was around 2 weeks ago.
Hmm.
And we were just chatting it up, and you were kind of sharing your story with me, and I was kind
Hmm.
of sharing my experience with you. And out of that conversation, it led to this podcast and bringing you on, because and I'll let you do all the talking, and you could share everything that's on your heart and mind. But it led to this podcast and us talking about people who are in a process,
Hmm.
for lack of a better word, or for people that are in the middle. They're not necessarily where they want to be,
Hmm.
and they've come also a long way from where they were,
Hmm.
but they find themselves in the middle. And
Yeah.
sometimes the middle could be a little confusing. It could be very obscure
Hmm.
and unknown and uncomfortable. And, sometimes you don't know what to do when you're in that process. And so that's when we were like, okay, let's chat about that. I feel
Yeah.
like a lot of people will resonate and relate
Hmm.
to our conversation, the conversation that you and I are going to have. And you know what, even as we have this conversation, both of us, will get to this place where we discover, how do you handle the process? How do
Yeah.
you handle the middle place?
Hmm.
And so let's first start off with this, though. Let's first start off with sharing your story. And don't give me the short version, give me the longer version,
I'll
okay?
try my best. Okay.
Share your personal story, where you grew up, how you met Jesus, just everything, and share it till current time.
Okay, for sure. Yeah, I think it's so interesting talking about my story because I feel like I usually say the same thing to a lot of people. Like I describe myself in like 2 words and like that kind of encapsulates my whole story. But going back, like the further back I go, the more I see like how it's almost been like a straight line. Like it's like leading to like where I am right now, and like my story is really unfolding, and the pieces are coming together in a sense that like I'm just becoming more aware of like
Mm,
what happened to me when I was younger and what God was doing in those spaces and who I was meeting and why people were saying specific things to me and how they're kind of coming up now. I think going as far back as possible, even like how you mentioned God, I think like he is like the beginning of my story and just
mm,
like the first kind of yeah, the first thing that really existed to kind of get my story started was God. And I think like more than me saying that, like when I found God or I had this period of time where I was like searching for God, God really found me. And it was, I don't have necessarily the crazy story about like rebellion or, you know, being
mm,
despising God or like not wanting God. It was really just a simple thing in my childhood, honestly, where, and I always say this and I feel weird saying this, but I enjoyed God. As a kid, like I really liked to be around God and I really liked, like when he found me and when I found him, it was just a really nice connection. And so like when I was a kid, um, there was some weirdness about it where like so many people would tell me what my life would be like and would tell me these things about how God is going to intervene in my life in this way and how God is blessing me in this way. But honestly, it was really personal with me and God. Like no matter
mm.
what has happened exteriorly, it's always just been me and God, and it's always been me and Him being able to navigate it together. And I think it started at a very young age, where
Mm,
again, like I think there was probably prompts like growing up in a Christian household to read your Bible. Like me and my family spent time in the Word together. We went to church. All those different things existed to push me towards God, but it just felt organic
mm.
how He found me, and it just felt
Wow.
so unbothered by what's going on around. And I think with that, I didn't really struggle to fit in with being a believer, I guess. Like I never felt the pressure or the peer pressure when being in the world almost and being in like spaces where people don't really like God or like people are finding themselves and rebelling against God or just you know at different places and spaces. I just never felt that pressure because I felt like it was just us, like it was me and him together. And so
Wow.
I think I there's a dream that I had when I was a kid. I have so much dreams and I have so many dreams that have come true and just have meant different things in my life. And I think my earliest memory of a dream was it was God. It was like this godly figure almost.
Mm,
And it was like the whole world was like on his back. And he was like I was standing in front of him and he was holding the world on his back. And like in the dream I heard this voice saying, like, I'm just protecting you from the world. And I think it
wow.
was this beautiful thing where like God had really set out for just us to have a pure and unique relationship together. And so
Wow.
in a really huge sense, like I just never felt the pressure of the world to like intervene into a relationship or like get at it. It just felt so like secure. It's just me and him as good friends. And I think naturally with that came my desire, like as I get to know God, I want to tell people about God. And just in a natural way. It's like it's not really about like a
Mm,
burden or just like this desire to be like to please him necessarily or like to I don't know, just it wasn't like unnatural. It came very naturally where I'm like, I really like this guy and like I really want
wow.
to tell more about his story and like I've come to enjoy him on my own. And I think that just only goes so far. So naturally, like just instinctively, I just found myself talking about God and like being in
Mm,
spaces and places where that was the conversation that I was having because I enjoyed my time with him. And it was just nothing crazy. It was nothing, you know, just like there's this anointing or gift or anything like that. It was just I liked God and I liked my time with him and I
wow.
liked what he was teaching me and I liked the little things that we were being able to discover together and it felt like so safe and secure. And so it got to a point where I'm like, man, like I want to talk about God and I want to be in spaces and places where they're talking about God because I like this stuff and I'm enjoying it.
Wow.
Um, and so naturally with that became like ministry conversations and conversations about like, hey, what are you interested in? Or hey, I can see you doing this and I can see you doing that. And I didn't really ever think about it myself. I actually didn't want to do anything regarding ministry growing up just because I didn't want anything to be forced. But like naturally, I guess when you
Mm,
talk about God and when you're in that space of God, like that is how ministry kind of evolves. And I think how it should evolve, where just out of your desire, it just comes. And so
Wow.
yeah, from a really young age, I found myself in different spaces of ministry just because whether it was like a
Mm,
lack of resources or just a lack of um, people deciding to like do this kind of thing, I naturally just found myself leading Bible studies and being part of prayer teams. And then it transitioned into preaching and just being able to share the gospel on different platforms. But honestly, like when it comes down to the root of it, like I'm just finding stuff with God and enjoying my time with him and wanting other people to know about that. That's just who I am as a person. Like
wow.
I always tell people like if I learn like a new fact in the week, I'm gonna tell someone. Like I'm just gonna
That's
like
great.
wanna
That's
explain
great.
what like amazing things that I've learned. Like I just never feel the need to keep it to myself. And like if there's something that interests me, if there's something that I'm excited about, I always just want to tell someone like right away. Like I'll watch a documentary on whales and like somehow I'll force like whales into a conversation with someone that I'm talking to that
I
week
love it.
just because I'm so excited about the new things that I'm learning. So I think it was the same thing with God. I just really enjoyed the revelations that he was pouring into my heart and
Mm,
I wanted to share that in any way that I could. And so that's how I guess ministry and just preaching kind of came into my life. I didn't necessarily have the confidence to do that right away, but I I attribute a lot of that to one God, just like working on my heart and being able to give me the ability to speak. And once you
mm,
kind of get into it, you kind of almost become obsessive with communication. Like I really love just the art of communication and just like being a good communicator. And I think it's funny. It's just my beginnings are drama class, honestly. Like drama class where
you
I had
took
to do
drama
solo.
class?
I did in high school. There was no
Wow.
acting classes available, and so by God's grace, I ended up in a drama class, and I had to do like things like solo performances in front of just like a large group of people, and that really brought out my desire and love to communicate. And so from
Wow.
that place, just like adding it to the word and just being excited just to speak and communicate. And I think someone asked me like what's your creative outlet, and I really do think it is, for one thing, is to speak, and it's just to
Mm,
understand the art of speaking and be inspired by great speakers in life. Like when I was younger, I just used to watch speeches by Winston Churchill and just like really break
wow.
down like how he inspired a nation and how different people were able to communicate ideas to really get people on board with your ideas. And so I realized that like to be a mouthpiece for God, like it required me to want to be the best speaker I could possibly be and learn the art and really respect it. And so that's where I've been since then. And like during university, I was just preaching and just doing stuff with learning how to be a better speaker. But there's like that other side to my story, I guess, of like business and just like
Mm,
I love the idea of creating value and just like where
mm,
something doesn't exist to create value and just to manipulate and to be creative on systems that already exist to see something new come into place and just even creating value in the economy with your friends, your family, employing people, and just like that idea of bringing people together to create something special has always been on
wow.
my heart. And so study business in university. um, and I think one of the things that have been coupled with that is just the desire for entrepreneurship and the desire for
Mm,
really taking on and we'll talk about this, I guess, being in the middle, because if you take on any
absolutely.
route of entrepreneurship, it's just there's
Yeah.
so much of a middle space and so much of a unknown kind of part to it. But I've always just felt super optimistic. I think that's one of the things that God has also protected me from is just um, not really reality, but like I almost felt so like I didn't grow out of my childlike dream and like just my childlike imagination and belief that I can really do anything. And so I think God really protected that for me in my heart, just being discouraged by the world and just being discouraged that I can't do things. And so from a young age, like I really love the idea of business and just building things and being excited to build and excited to like see something new come to life. And it hasn't ever been like met with that opposition of like, man, but this is all the risk and all the, the chances of failure. Like usually I just feel optimistic and I would actually classify myself, and I say this all the time, as a realistic optimist where I believe
I
like
love that.
anything is possible. I truly from the bottom of my heart believe anything is possible. You just have to be able to work really hard. And I think that's just something that I grew up understanding just with parents, with siblings, family members. You have to love working hard, but like instead of kind of like taking in the negativity or the idea of failure, just take in like hard work. Like let that be your
Mm,
answer to every idea of like, the potential of failure, the potential of things not working out is, don't let anything hurt your belief. Don't let anything touch the thing that's inside your heart. Just work really hard. And like, I think that formula together of like work as hard as possible and dream as big as possible, they just go together so well. Um,
absolutely.
and so that's just been my motto, I guess, ever since then, is just like believe, trust, be as optimistic as possible, be as childlike as possible in your ability to dream. Don't really let anything kind of touch that space. And so, yeah, I really give so much credit to God for that as well. Like, it's just been so weird, again, like how things didn't like interfere in my relationship with God. Like, just so many things didn't interfere in my sense of optimism in life. Um, and I really give credit to God for that, because whether it was like teachers or just family members or just random people who've come into my life just to encourage me, that like it's been weird, like even some of them have given up on their dreams, but like, yeah, but for you,
Mm,
like I'll be optimistic for you. And I think that's just such a
mm,
blessing from God, where like you don't feel the weight of barriers, you don't feel the weight of, I don't know, just any kind of like sense of doubt and obstacles. Of course that comes, and of course it creeps in, but there's just something that's always been protected. Like I really believe and I really am optimistic. And so I think that's a gift that I want to share with people, and just
wow.
being an encourager into other people's lives, because so many people grow up in different environments and backgrounds where it's just negativity has been pushed into their lives. So
Yeah.
I feel
Yeah.
like because it's been positivity and positive reinforcement has come into my life, I just really feel it's a part of my purpose in this life to encourage other people and to be there with them in a space where they maybe are wanting to give up or are not sure about how it could work out, and just to be there to reignite and reconnect them with what's in their heart and what they really feel purposefully led to. And so, yeah,
Wow.
encouragement is the biggest thing of my life, and just wanting to share that with as many people as possible. So I guess that's kind of like,
That's really cool.
yeah.
No, that's awesome, man. We need more people like you in the world. I feel like there's a lot of people out there that are definitely struggling, are definitely discouraged and hurt and feel like giving up. But we need more people like you who are willing to pick those people up and say, no, this is not the end of your story. It's not a period, it's just a comma. And
Yeah.
it's, there's more to see, there's more great to come on the other side. And so that's incredible, man. I love, again, as I mentioned in the introduction, it's just every time I talk to you, it just the word well-rounded just comes to mind.
Mhm.
And I'm sure as people are listening to this podcast, they're like, yeah, like I sense and feel that too as well. And so, like, I have a question for you, man.
Mm.
You talked about a lot, and I would love to just pick apart some of those things that you shared.
Mhm.
But in reference to the last part that you said, when it comes to giving up and people that give up, why do you think that is? Like, what's causing people to give up, especially if they know they've been called to something, they know they are designed and built to do something, or
Mhm.
maybe have a desire or a dream, as you mentioned, to do
Yeah.
something. Why do you feel like people want to give up? You know, of course, there's different levels, to this, and of course, I want to be a respecter of everybody because people are going through different levels of struggle and problems, and it's like, oh, okay, like it, from a person to person, human to human standpoint, it's like if you're going through all of this, you're just like, man, I would give up too, type of thing, right? But
Mhm.
it's like I really want to tackle this conversation is, why do you feel like people want to give up?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. Is everything good? By the way, picture wise, audio wise?
Perfect.
Okay,
Nothing could
perfect.
be
Yeah.
more perfect right now.
All right. Honestly, like, the first thing that came to my mind was like, if you're on the ground and you have to get up, like, you're almost like fighting gravity. You know what I mean? Oh my bad.
Mm,
And there's always going to be that force that like it's just easier to like be down, and it's harder to get up,
mm,
pull yourself forward. Like there's this force that, whether it's just voices and opinions, whether it's like, hey, like it's a bad time, there's a recession right now, there's always going to be something that pushes you down, and it's very easy just to allow that to like, you just go with the flow. It's
just
just
stay
gravity. You
down.
can just, yeah, you can just naturally fall into that. And so I think to be someone who kind of rises up and like pushes, you're always fighting a current. You're always fighting something that like it feels unnatural to like, why are you dreaming? Like, why are you excited? Why are you that person who gets to do this amazing thing with your life? There's always going to be so many things that push you down naturally. And I think to be
Wow.
someone who gets up and fights and like pushes for the things that are inside of your heart, like you have to be willing to fight, and you have to be willing to
Wow.
go toe to toe, face to face with some of your biggest fears, some of the biggest things that will change your character and mold you into the person who I think will be amazing at the end of this. But
Mm,
it's not without fight. It's not without being able to say, like, hey, there's forces that are coming against me and I have to rise above it. Like, and naturally, it just feels easier to stay down. It feels easier to not
wow.
cause a commotion. And, you know, depending on what family group you came from, like, hey, like go a more
Mm,
traditional route, or go do something that's more guaranteed, or it's more simple, I guess. And so there's always going to be the difficulty in one, believing in yourself and generating that strength almost on your own. Sometimes you just really feel that like, this is me going against this entire current, and it can be different people and it can be different ideologies and thought beliefs and society as a whole, just because, you know, maybe you're in a space or a place where that's just not done a lot, and like you're the only one
wow.
who's doing this thing. And so you do
Mm,
feel so alone, and you have to generate this power from within. um so
wow.
ultimately, I fully get it. I fully get the idea that it's easier to stay down, or it's easier to stay on like level ground where you don't really have to make as many waves, because you have to deal with all those consequences once you do. It could be a lack of money, it could be a lack of understanding, a lack of just support in general. And so fighting all those different things, like, to some people, like the Bible talks, like, count the cost. Is it worth it?
Mm,
If you want to step into that thing. And so ultimately, like, there's people like me who are screaming like, yes, yes, it's 100% worth it. But that's why I always add the realistic part to my optimism, where
mm,
you have to know your stuff. You have to be willing to like really, really dig down deep into everything that's going on, and be willing to fight and go every single day. Like, before I left the company that I was previously working at,
mm, mm.
um, my boss gave me advice. He's like, I know you're interested in entrepreneurship. And he looked me dead in the eye and he's like, I've been doing this for 7 years. And he's like, this is just not easy. And he's like, and he really was like,
Like entrepreneurship is not
yeah,
easy, or business
yeah,
is okay. Okay.
yeah, entrepreneurship, and just the idea of like wanting to fight that current and wanting to stand up every day and be there and be present. Like, he just looked me dead in the eye and he was so serious. And um, just talking about all the sacrifices and talking about all the things that he's had to put aside and everything that he's done to be that guy who gets there every single day and like is present with all those battles that you have to go through. He just looked me so dead in the eye and he's like, this is just not easy. And so
Wow.
he said, just check yourself and be sure that you're willing to be that person, and to give up those certain luxuries and just all those different things. But at the end of the day, the way he would just describe his life and the joy that he finds every single day, I think there's always something of beautiful on the other side of fear, and there's always something beautiful on the other side of struggle. Um, and so to keep your eyes on that and to keep your eyes fixed on like what is inside of you, and to constantly reconnect with what's in your heart, I think is so important in that struggle and in that fight. But yeah, there's so many different
Wow.
natural forces that are coming against you to make you want to not even start and to give up before the fight has really even begun.
Yeah, that's really good. I even love the the picture that you gave when it comes to why people tend to give up easily is because when it comes to elevating or going higher, there is 100% a gravitational pull, and there is this current that comes against you, and
Mm-hmm.
you do have to have the capacity and also the ability to fight back against that gravitational pull, or that current that's really coming against you.
Mm-hmm.
Just to kind of talk about the current a little bit, because I really love it. Do you feel like the reason why people are afraid to fight back is because they're afraid that what they fear may come to reality, in the sense of, like, I want to fight this and I actually want to go after what I feel like God is calling me to, but I have this fear. And this fear comes in the form of, what if this happens, or what if that happens? And because of that fear, there's just that inability to fight back or push back against that current. Do you feel like that's maybe one of the not obviously the whole reason, but do you feel like that's one of the reasons on why people don't fight back, because they're afraid of their fear coming into reality? And if so, is that something that you've ever dealt with in your life, personal
Mm-hmm.
experience?
100%. And I think um, a lot of even what comes with that fear is like who you are and your ability to handle these things, and like your ability to,
Mm,
what's it called? I guess like imposter syndrome or something, like where you can't even
yeah,
imagine
I was
yourself.
just thinking about that. That's
Yeah,
crazy.
like
Yeah.
you can't
Yeah.
imagine yourself as that guy or as that woman who's in that space doing those things. And I think even if it were to succeed, like, can I sustain it? Can I be that person? Am I that guy who like I want to do this thing, but am I that person? I think, yeah, the fear of what starts to happen and what's going to start to take place in your life can be huge. And I think thinking about like who am I and how am I equipped to handle these things is something that is usually paired with that. Um, Ultimately, I think like, man, like just the more I've been surrounded by people who have been successful and have been, have fought and I guess been on the other side of things. I don't want to discredit anybody, but like, man, there's really nothing that separates us. Like, there's nothing that
Mm.
separates us as human
From
beings.
the people that have achieved that success and so on. Okay.
Mhm.
Mm.
I think there's this weird thing where like I was talking to my sister the other day and she was telling me like, man, some people like dive so deep into things and they still feel like an amateur, and they still like when you really get into your craft or into your practice or whatever you're doing, like you still never will call yourself like someone who knows a lot and someone who's actually really really into this thing. You'll always feel like an amateur and you always feel like I know so much, but like if you spoke to someone who doesn't know anything about the topic, they think you're amazing and they think that you know so much. And so I think people don't even give themselves enough credit for how much they know and how much like they're actually like well equipped to handle certain things and how much they've gone into this thing. And so sometimes there's a lack of understanding of how much you've done and how much work you've put in and how much, strength you've generated. And like maybe you are at the beginning, maybe you haven't done all those things, but yeah, get started and like don't be afraid, because you can be that person and you can be that person who handles those things. Like really just breaking down the idea of what separates you from someone else and just realizing it's just a few actionable steps and it's just a few things that you can
Mm.
really begin to step into and be confident. And like I think some of it is just really people are just humble and like they'll again like they'll never understand of themselves like how great they actually are. And so it's not to be prideful, but it's really to be like, man, that humility is going to make you so wise and it's going to make you so able to move in these spaces with great wisdom, with great power, with great excellence. Like just don't let your humility make you
Wow.
think less of yourself. I think that's what C.S. Lewis always talks about,
C.S.
right?
Lewis, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And
exactly. He says, humility is not thinking less of yourself, not
mhm,
thinking less of yourself, but thinking about yourself less.
mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'd say a lot of people have that and they don't even realize that. And so ultimately you're so equipped if
Mm,
that's like those are just like the character things. I know it sounds like we need all these technical things in our lives to like we have to do these certain skills and step into these things, but a lot of it comes down to character and a lot of it just comes down to who you are internally. And so I'd say so many people are ready and can face the things that are going to come because of who they are as a person. And yeah, just be encouraged by that. I think that's just something super important.
no, absolutely, man. You know, I actually really love that quote from C.S. Lewis. It changed my perspective entirely, especially David, and I know you know this to be true, as I know it to be true, especially growing up in Ethiopian culture.
Yeah, talk about
There's
it.
this sense of I don't know. I don't know what it is, man, but it's I what I do know is that I certainly adopted the mentality in my
Mm,
behavior and in my thinking where humbleness is seen as this thing as like, for all my Ethiopians out there or my Eritreans, it's like I'm misking and I put my head down and it's like,
yeah.
no, like I'm nothing or
Mm,
just kind of this I really can't put words to it, but for all my, Habeshas, they know exactly what I'm talking about.
mm,
And I adopted that mentality. I
mm,
really did. And I
mm,
and I thought that's what being humble meant, or I thought that's what humility meant. But
mm,
that quote from C.S. Lewis on, humility is not thinking less of yourself. And
mm.
sometimes in the Habesha culture, that's what we do. It's like we think so less of ourselves, but
Yeah.
it's really about thinking about yourself less. And
Mm,
it's, I don't like to call it confidence. I like to call it Godfidence.
mm,
It's this confidence not in myself, but it's confidence in God who is in me
mm.
and the God who has gifted me and the God who, it just starts with God first.
Yeah.
And I really do agree with you when it when it comes to being in the process of either walking towards what God has called you to, it
Mm,
really takes character. It really does. Like honestly, David, if if we were to boil it down to anything, it's
mm,
not what you have, it's not the amount of money that you have, it's not the amount of possessions that you have or that you carry,
mm,
but it's really about who you are, your character. And if you could be secure in knowing who you are, especially as a Christian, knowing who you are in Christ, man, that current, the gravity that pulls you down, that tries to pull you down, no longer has
mm,
really a hold over you because you
mm,
know who you are and you know who you are and you know the God that you serve as well.
mm.
So yeah, 100%, man. It's just one of those things I think we need to talk more about because and let me know, like talk about this a little bit. Being in the church, by the way, I've heard you preach on a couple of occasions. You are an excellent speaker. Like you're amazing. You're
Like,
just so natural, so organic, and you just break down the words so beautifully, and it's amazing to witness and it's amazing to watch. But you've grown up in ministry. You've seen ministry. And do you feel like in the church we don't emphasize character enough? Do
wow.
you feel like we like talk about, oh, God wants to do great things for you and amazing things for you, and and he does, and he
Mm.
will. But do you feel like we're doing a disservice in the church by not talking about character enough? What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I think even with the idea of fighting, right? Like, my mom, me and my mom, we always talk. Before I preach, I have to talk to my mom first, and so
I
she's
love that.
always the one who checks everything. Yeah. Um, But she, one day she came up to me and she apologized almost. She was like, "Man, like I taught you so many different spiritual principles, but like I don't think I taught you how to fight." And like just
Wow.
yeah, and it really it clicked into
Wow.
me that like it's a lost art, I guess, to to look within and to generate that strength to be able to fight. And so yeah, I definitely think that that ability can sometimes be lost within spheres within the church. I think that ultimately, like the more I talk to people, and the more I enter in these spaces, like that's what I want to do. I want to like, renew our minds within that space of one, just like you said, like that wall, it will come down. You know what I mean? Like
Yes,
it can come
absolutely.
down once you start to like look within. Ultimately, I think even the art of being transformed into someone with that character is not even highlighted as much as it could be. I think there's things that God sees within our hearts that we have to really open up to Him and allow Him to transform and change it and to bring that sense of character within us. But being like on the offensive when it comes to being transformed, being on the offensive when it comes to like, man, God, adopt these characteristics and these ways of thinking within me. Sometimes it is missed. Sometimes like we don't talk about how like one, there's a natural force that is the enemy who wants to push in false identities into you and false
Yeah.
senses of characters. And you actually have to fight with God to renew your mind and to start that process over where, man, I like God sees me in this way and God is saying something completely different. And so ultimately, like,
Mm,
yeah, I think that's something that we do need to focus on and just like really being on the offensive and like intentional about our character because not a lot of us are taught how to fight and not a lot of us are taught how to really have a sense of belief and confidence that comes from God and activating that in our spirits like on a day-to-day basis, not even just like I need this confidence for that meeting, but just like to be someone who's being renewed by God, transformed by God, to understand who you are and have the confidence to go out in spaces and occupy them for the kingdom. So yeah, I
wow.
definitely.
Wow. No, that's really good, man. One of the things that I have understood in my journey with walking with the Lord is his deepest work happens in private.
Mm,
His deepest work happens in private.
mm-hmm,
I have realized that you are your truest self when no one is looking.
yeah.
And if there is a difference between the person that people see in public and the person there is in private, there is some work that the Lord has to do so that he could really fortify your character so that you could be the same private and publicly. And I think the reason why I say this is because most of the battle happens in private.
Mm-hmm,
A lot of the battles that we go through happen in private. It happens in our relationships with our families and at home. And it's like I feel like that's where God begins to fortify your character. It's not
mm-hmm,
it I don't believe it starts in public. And let me know what you think about this. But I
mm-hmm,
don't think it starts publicly. I think if you want to go where God has called you to, it starts at home by yourself and who you are privately when no one is looking. And I think that's where the fight or the training for the fight begins to happen
mm-hmm.
personally. What
Yeah,
do you think?
100%. I think sometimes I've had a sense of destiny where I want to act so quickly and go out and do things. And I think it's always in those moments that God has pulled me back to that personal space. And it's not to
Mm,
say that like um you have to be like the word is like hidden, I guess, like to be hidden with
mm,
God and like to really be in that space. And I think people think that like, oh man, that's gonna last forever. Like I'll never be able to like step into the things that I want to step into. But
yeah.
ultimately, like I've realized it's just better to go with him, right? And like sometimes he will put you into that space where you are hidden and nothing's really seen and there's nothing that you can be attributed to your name just yet, right?
Yeah.
Um, but it's in that space where I shared this with you when we were talking about like it was the happiest I've ever been because like I see myself evolving and like God can
Mm.
affirm who you're gonna be and what you're gonna do before anything happens, right? Like before one bit of success or door opens or anything like that, like you can understand who you are and who you're gonna be in those private spaces because He's really, really done the work on your heart and into your character.
Exactly. Mm.
Man, I think just don't despise it would be the thing that I say. Like, don't
Yeah.
despise small beginnings, as the Bible says, and don't despise being
Yes.
hidden by God because ultimately, like, to be poured into allows you to like never run out, you know? And I think that's the thing that like
Yes.
I
Yes.
really want is just longevity and to be able to, whatever I do and whatever spaces I enter into, to really last and to really be able to be in that space and to pour out onto other people. I think sometimes we go so quickly that one, we don't have enough for ourselves, let alone other people. But I think when you're hidden with God and you just spend time with the Lord, like He can fill you so much to where you
Mm.
have it for yourself, but it's actually overflowing for other people. And then that's how you become that
Mm.
well. Um,
Yeah.
where other people can draw from you from time to time. And so, yeah, I think it's so important
Wow.
to really be molded by the Lord and just allow Him to directly speak to you without any kind of circumstance which would like distract you, if that makes
Exactly.
sense. It's like
Mm.
in that moment, again, I found being so happy just in that hidden space and like to the point where I want to run back to being hidden again, even in the midst of me like thinking that I should probably move forward. Like I want to run back to being hidden because I'm like, man, that's where I got to meet God and God meet me and just like for us to grow and understand things together. So I think it's so critical.
Yeah, it really is. No, this is the aspect of the podcast that, I really want to highlight to people that are either watching or listening is I think when I, who was it that said it? A.W. Tozer? Is it him? He's
Maybe.
like, the most important thing about you is what you believe about God, I believe.
Mm,
I think that's a paraphrase, but it's is definitely something along those lines. Is like the most important part about you as an individual is how you see God in terms of his
mm,
character and his ways and his will. And when we have a healthy understanding of who God is and how he operates, I think it speaks into how to deal with the process, how
mhm,
to deal with whether you're in the beginning, in the middle, or in the end of the process. It really informs how to go about it. It really informs even how to think about it. And, what we're talking about right now, the idea of small beginnings, this is
mm,
who our God is. Our
mm,
God says that the kingdom of God starts as a seed, like
mm,
it's as a seed, and then it progressively grows into a tree.
wow.
And I think when it comes to this idea of, what can we do while we're in the middle of the process? Like, what can we do when maybe we don't know what to do? You know, maybe speak into this a little bit, David.
Mm,
How can someone generate a fight within them?
mm,
Or what practical tools can you give someone who's in the middle? Like
yeah.
they don't know what to do. They're a little bit confused. Things are maybe not going the way they expect for it to go, or they have this dream that they're wanting to go after, but they're in the middle. And when we say middle, it's we're talking about a lot of things, but
Mm,
how does someone proceed forward, to
yeah.
continually move on? Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
No, that's great. I think even thinking about back to my experience, I think the moment I realized that like, man, I really don't know right now. Like or like I really lack an idea of the next steps or like am I close? Am I far? Am I like doing the right things. I think that's when I realized that, like, man, no man is an island, and you need to find other
Mm-hmm.
people who are occupying the same space, maybe a little bit further ahead of you, or like maybe also starting at the same place, just to get a different perspective. Because like ultimately, guidance is really good, and I think
Yeah, it's good.
the moment that you realize that, like, I'm not really sure, like, add some guidance into your life and add some perspective. And for me, that, like, okay, I was interested in startups, and I'm like, okay, let me go work for a startup. And that's what I did. Like, the
Mm-hmm.
last two places that I worked for were like startups, because I'm like, I don't really know how these things operate. I want to do it. I want to chase my dreams, and like maybe I'm like have this idea, but I don't even know how they operate, and I don't really know how they work and the structure of things and who's critical and which pieces that you really need. So I worked for those places, and not even really with the intent of like trying to grow in those companies, but I'm like, man, I just want to learn from these spaces and like really be around people who are doing what I want to do. And like
That's good.
I think that just works in all elements of life. Like, just surround yourself, build an ecosystem with what you're passionate about. Build an ecosystem. Like, it can be as simple as like buying a book. Like, I think buying a book on what you're interested in is a huge investment. Um,
Mm.
Even a simpler way, like you can make your TikTok feed based, like you can work that algorithm to make it all
Yep.
related to what you're interested in. Like if you're
And what you
super
value
interested
and
in,
so on. Mm.
yeah, like if you want to be a chef, you can click on every food video and like it and save it and keep searching it up, and they'll see that's what you want to do. And so you can build an ecosystem around you. And I think with that, like you'll just find guidance because you're surrounded by naturally. Like when I was in those companies, like I would just look like what's going on, like how often are they going into meetings, and like what are they talking about, like what's that guy's job, I need to figure out what he does because that means he does this. And like you can start to piece it all together. And I think be bold with it, man. Like find someone who's doing it a lot better than you and just like shoot your shot. You know what I mean? Like I think like it was like a month into being there, and like the startup grew to like 300, and I'm like hitting up the CEO on Slack, and I'm like, hey, would you ever go out for coffee with me? And it took him like 3 weeks to respond with pretty much a no. And like I think
He said no.
literally was like, hey,
Yeah.
come to one of our sessions, or like that they bring into everyone. I'm like, okay, I've been to that. But like it's to, really go
Mm.
after it, and really go after people who are just doing the things that you love, and just hear from them and understand their stories. Nobody's story is the exact same, so you don't have to mimic it per se. But to be in that environment will just allow you to see and hear new terms and different vocabulary, and like you become entrenched in that thing. And so I think
Wow.
that's a great place to start. Um, my pastor Noah, he always says this thing too. Um, that it's easier for God to give you guidance, I guess, like, or to steer a car that's driving rather than parked. You know what I mean? So to
Mm.
start something, just to be in something, and like really invite God, like, God, I'm moving, just like take care of the wheel, like I'm gonna put my foot on the gas, do a little thing here and there, but ultimately move and guide me into the direction that you want me to go. Like there's a specific verse, I think, like, instruct me and teach me in the ways that I should go, counsel me with your righteous eye on me. And I've been saying that since I was probably like in the seventh grade, like just like like really just instruct me and teach me in the ways that you should go, counsel me with your righteous eye on me. I think once you start to move, God will really do that for you. And so, yeah, I think just surrounding
Wow.
yourself with as much of like-minded people, environments, places, and just start moving a little bit is like the best thing I could say.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. There was a study, there was actually an article that came out from NBC, I believe,
Hmm.
and they did a study on people that work out by themselves and people that work out with a group.
Hmm.
And they tested, you know, these groups where one decided to go into a fitness program for like a couple weeks and went
Hmm.
into it by himself and didn't complete the program. But they saw that there's actually a 95% success rate when people go with a group. And
Mm.
so they actually complete the program when they're among a community and that have the
Yeah.
same mindset and that are willing to go after the same goal. And it's to your point. I think we need to surround ourselves with people like you and like so many others that, have godly ambitions. They have
Hmm.
dreams. They have really things that God has called them to, and they can't do it by themselves. And
Hmm.
that's such an important point for people to understand is like we were never meant to be an island. Never. We were always meant to be in a community. We're always meant to be among people that could really encourage us and,
Hmm.
move us forward. So thank you for saying that because I think there's a lot of people that need to hear that, probably looking around them being like, who's there for me, and
Hmm.
who's really encouraging me, who's helping me up when I fall and stuff like that. So, you know, I I want to ask you two more questions,
Sure.
and it's involving entrepreneurship.
Mm.
I could relate to you right now, especially because I, I I developed a startup business, and I am in the thick of
Yeah.
what it's like to start up a business, essentially.
Hmm.
And man, I feel like there are a lot of people that have an ambition to start up a business,
Hmm.
but don't know where to start and so on and so forth, or maybe again are going through that current, and just pushing them back.
Hmm.
For you, what have you experienced in that world? Because you said you were employed with two startup companies or three? Sorry,
Yeah,
two,
too.
two. What have you observed, man, when it comes to a startup company? What have you observed to really find success in that area? Just by looking
Mhm.
at other people and looking at what they're doing, what have you really seen um, to really help those companies really find success?
Yeah. I think even going back to my last point, it's people. Like it's really, really comes
It's
down to
people.
like
Mm,
I fully understand that some people might be on their own in the beginning, and that's completely
mm,
it's a beautiful process on your own, I think too. But especially for those companies that I've been in, like I've seen so many talented individuals, but it's just impossible again to do it all by
wow,
themselves. I think like
that's good.
in those moments, um, the best CEO that I worked with, he
Mm,
was just someone who was just constantly empowering others and constantly just like investing in those around him, but also just believing in them at the same time too. I think sometimes we have so much ambition as someone who wants to be a founder or someone who wants to do things that we don't even really want to share our vision with others or entrust other people to kind of like
mm,
be as like driven and impactful as you are. And I think sometimes you want to hold on to it so tightly because it means so much to you and you're particular about certain ways of doing things. But man, I've seen a lot of success in people who can just relinquish their dreams amongst other people.
wow,
um I
that's
met an
good.
investor and he even told me like he invests in companies that feel more like a family. Like he'll invest in spaces and
Mm,
places where like people are growing together and people are having kids at the same time and like they feel like there's a rhythm and routine within people. And so I think ultimately
that's
surrounding
really
yourself with
good.
the right people and entrusting what you have inside of your heart to others and believing that like man, like each person plays his own part, like how the Bible describes the body of Christ. I think just like to relinquish so much control and be humble enough to believe in the person beside you and fight alongside with them, but at the same time, always be willing to go back and help and go back and like make it clear. And like sometimes you have all these ideas in your mind and like people don't right away
Mm,
get them. So taking time to explain it to someone, taking time to, again, just bring yourself down to that level where it's like, it doesn't go as fast as you want to, but it
Yeah,
progresses in the right. And so,
that's
yeah,
really
I've seen a
good.
lot of that way, but I think on the individual standpoint, um, when you're alone in it, and you really maybe don't have the capacity to hire someone or do something with you at that
Yeah.
time, yeah, oh man, there's so much I could say for people in that space and place, but consume everything is usually like
Mm,
what I've heard. Like someone was just telling me like, man, like after work, just like consume, 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 and especially people our age, we're at a place where what we can consume now is like at its like peak. So as we get older, like we won't be able to consume at that level that we're at right now. So this is the time to just feed yourself and to
that's
really
so good.
consume and be surrounded by these things and take it in, take it in, take it in, read this, read this, read this, understand how he did that and the way he did this. And I think consuming and being around that, not to the place where you have analysis paralysis, you never do anything
Yes,
because
yes,
you
yeah,
feel like all I'm doing is consuming, but let it be like added to as you go continue to fill yourself, as you go continue to fill yourself, and let
yeah,
that be a
yeah.
practice of consistency. um
That's good.
and I think it also makes you a little bit humble too, where it's like, man, like he did that and that's so amazing, and you can be inspired by that. Never be scared or threatened, but always be inspired.
That's good. Yeah, that's really, really good. I love that. I think for me in this season too, I'm trying to consume as much as I can. Like
Mm,
every book, every podcast, just learning from other people, and it you have to be open to criticism as well,
mm-hmm,
because there's going to be things that you're doing that probably may not be beneficial to your startup company, but you
mm-hmm,
have to be open and willing to actually listen to constructive criticism. Sorry, maybe
mm-hmm,
I should say that, because sometimes criticism without solution is not helpful at all, but it's just
mm-hmm.
criticism, and it's just
Yeah,
like you need people around you that are going to give you constructive criticism, which
mhm,
entails solutions. It's solution
yeah,
orientated. Okay, so last question for you, man.
sure.
For the for those that are listening and watching this, and they could be on whatever part of the spectrum, like they could be in the beginning of the process, they could be in the middle of the process, or they could be at the end,
Mm-hmm,
wherever they are on that spectrum. How does knowing God and also letting God be known relate to this particular topic that we're
mm,
speaking on right now?
that's really good. Oh, that's really awesome. I think, oh man, going back to those like small beginnings and going back to being hidden and
Mm,
having that place with God, I think it's in those moments. Um, man, like, sorry, I'll like go. My mind sometimes goes all over the place, but
yeah, no
I've been in
problem.
spaces and places before where I'm like, man, like I don't have access to that room. Like I see all these executives and people who are like supposed to be important, like sitting down in rooms, and I'm just like on the outside. Like I wonder what they're talking about. Like with
Hmm.
God, you are in the room. Like you, like what God is
Wow.
doing on this earth, and with what He's working on, like in establishing His kingdom, you have
Hmm.
access to that room. Like you get to
Wow.
step in and be with God and work hand in hand with God. So I think in that moment, you get to really
Wow.
understand the heart of God and what He's working on, what He's passionate about. And I think He can touch you in those moments to see, man, like I've built you, I've designed you, I've made you in a specific way. And in that moment, you get to be inspired by, like, man, I'm working with God. And I think in that
Wow.
moment, you get to know God and then be able to be inspired to make God be known, to see what He's doing in this
Wow.
world, to see where He wants to make impact. So never believe that there's not a space for you in this kingdom. Like you have
Mm.
access to that room, and you get to go in there and work hand in hand with the Savior. And I think with that, it's like always, 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 always be reminded that like He's put something on your heart. Sometimes it takes a while to find what that thing is and to
Mm.
understand like, man, what is that thing that God's put on my heart? And I was doing like research on like this word passion, because everyone always talks
Mm.
about like what's my passion and like what I'm supposed
Mm.
to do. And there's a movie called The Passion of the Christ, And like
Mm.
just going into like the background on that word passion, especially in relating to Christ's life, it actually had a lot to do with suffering, and like had a lot to do with
Yep.
like with pain and like enduring things. And so one of the best definitions that I heard based on that time is just a willingness to suffer for what you love. And like
Yes, I
if you
agree.
understand
Mm.
Christ and his passion, it's like for God so loved, and like he was filled with love that he came,
Yes,
and like his
exactly.
action and his ministry and everything began. So being filled with what you love and understanding like what your heart loves so much that it almost be willing to suffer for. And like this
Yeah.
idea, whether it's, a certain issue or a people group or idea, like whatever it really is, connecting with that thing that creates passion within you, which is really just love, a willingness to suffer for what you love. And so connecting to God and what he's doing, like I love when Jesus said like that the harvest is plenty, but the workers are few. And
Mm.
I think I just want to join Jesus as a worker, right? And
That's
just
good.
join with him and be in that space like, God, whatever you need me to work on, whatever you need me to do, I want to be a worker. I heard there's a shortage. I'm willing to work. You know what I mean? And so
Yeah. Yeah.
really
Wow.
connecting and seeing what he sees. Whatever harvest that God was talking about, you need to just understand what that is for you, where you need to go and reap, where you need to go and collect that harvest. So,
Mm.
yeah, it starts with just connecting with the Father, sitting with him and being with him and allowing him to see what he's actually placed on your heart, and then moving in action with love as that, that thing pushing you forward.
Wow. Thank you, David. That was
Mm.
such an incredible answer. Appreciate you, man, for being on this. I honestly, I actually totally forgot that we were on a podcast at one point. I thought we were just talking one on one. But
Yeah.
man, seriously, thank you. Thank you for your obedience. Thank you for your perspective. Thank you for your devotion, more
Mm,
importantly, to Jesus and his kingdom.
mm.
It's so evident from your life, and it
Thank you.
flows and oozes out of you, man. And it's just so organic and so natural. So again, thank you so much for being on the podcast, man.
Of
Appreciate you.
course. Yeah, thank you for having
Yeah.
me. I just want to say, like, I'm a fan first. Like, I'm watching all episodes, and I encourage everyone to watch. So, yeah, keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah,
I think we've always so much admired each other from afar because we're separated by distance. But, like,
absolutely.
man, it's been so fun to watch you and just to see what you're doing, and praying for you always, man. Just keep going.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Appreciate you. Well, for those that are listening or watching, thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you guys got nuggets of wisdom, which has been shared today. Absolutely. I believe it. And, I really do believe that this podcast is for one sole purpose, which is to know God and let God be known. And so go out into the world and do exactly that. Love you guys so much, and we'll see you guys next week. Bye. Hey, Samuel Teka here again. I don't mean to bother you, but I just wanted to quickly remind you, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, what are you doing? Subscribe right now. And listen, if you're already subscribed and you want to be notified on when the videos come out, click the bell button on the top right-hand corner of the YouTube page. And listen, I'm also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So if you want to go check that out, check out the description down below. All right, guys, have a good day.